Hi, I'm Charlotte and this is Tired Mama Tries to Read. So I'm going to do my Victober wrap up really quickly because I don't have that much to say that hasn't already been said. I set myself a goal of 5 books and I read 3 of them. One I DNF'd pretty much at the start, which was Amy Dillwyn's book Jill, and I was buddy reading that with Sean and we both ditched it. So I'm glad we did, because it wasn't really up my street, but I've now come to realise that that was like, it was a type of Victorian fiction that I wasn't really aware of, where it was meant to be a bit ridiculous and it wasn't sort of the literary gem that I thought it was going to be. So I'm sad about that. But I did read, I've already talked about Silas Marner, which I really enjoyed after a rocky first half. So I won't say too much more about that, except to say that it still means my love of George Eliot is strong, which is good. And it kind of makes me want to read Middlemarch again. The other book I finished was Jane Eyre, and I have talked a fair bit about that as my journey's gone on. So again, I won't dwell, but I did really enjoy. And actually the last passage, which was sort of the last, I don't know, maybe is it 10 chapters or so, are all set when she goes away and she's sort of discovering herself. And I was really dreading those chapters, but they were awesome. And the end was really good. Obviously I knew how it ended, but I was surprised at the detail in the final chapter about other things that happened. I think that must be a Victorian thing, because a novel today just wouldn't end like that. There's a really great line in the last chapter, which everybody knows who's read it because they just remember it, but I'm not going to sort of spoil it. I've come to realise that it's not as well known as I thought, so I don't want to ruin it, but any modern novel would have ended on that line. And I kind of think it's quite like, I don't know, the naivety of that time, where obviously novels have been knocking about, but there wasn't still the, I don't know, maybe there wasn't still the knowledge that we have about creative writing to sort of, people maybe were more interested in the whole story. I don't know, maybe we weren't competing with TV, I don't know what it is, but yeah, it ends on a really sort of kind of like note where it's sort of, and this person did this and this person did this, and that is quite Victorian, I suppose. It's quite it's not unsurprising, but yeah, I was surprised because in my head the last line was the famous one and it wasn't. So yeah, but I did really enjoy it. I don't know whether I got as much out of it this time as I did the first time, weirdly. So I don't know. A book that really surprised me was H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, and I really liked it. I was surprised. It's not particularly beautiful. I'm sure there's a bit in here that I've marked. It wasn't particularly beautiful. Like, there weren't sort of like moments where I was thinking, oh wow, you know, this sort of describes how it feels to look upon the sunset, or this is how it feels when you're lonely. You know, there was lots of opportunities to talk about loneliness, and then he didn't really do it. Most of the time he's just talking about how he really misses eating meat, which is quite interesting, and he really can't wait to get home and eat some meat. Which is an interesting analogy, seeing as half the time he's comparing the species of what he thinks might be people with the fact that they're being bred like animals and how awful it is, and then he goes back and eats some animals. So that's quite interesting. I can't find it now, but there's some really interesting bits about fire, where he talks about, you know, what it must have been like. There's the smoke from the fire beat towards me, so it must be in this bit. Oh, here we go. I don't know if you have ever thought what a rare thing flame must be in the absence of man and in a temperate climate. The sun's heat is rarely strong enough to burn, even when it is focused by dewdrops, as is sometimes the case in more tropical districts. Lightning may blast and blacken, but it rarely gives rise to widespread fire. Decaying vegetation may occasionally smoulder within the heat of its fermentation, but this rarely results in flame. In this decadence, too, the art of fire-making had been forgotten on the earth. The red tongues that went licking up my heap of wood were an altogether new and strange thing. So I don't know, like little insights like that made you realise how the earth had changed, and you didn't feel necessarily like you were looking forward. You felt a lot of the time like you were reflecting on a past earth. So that was really interesting. I would definitely read H.G. Wells again, although I'm not going to lie, massively depressing. I was in work like hours after I'd finished it because I had an afternoon shift, and I just came in and I was like, the world's gonna end, it's so pointless. And everyone was like, oh, what have you been reading? And it is kind of, you know, he travels, it's a bit like the Doctor Who episode, Doctor Who again, where they travel right into the future to see the end of Earth. He sort of travels into the future and the descriptions are bleak, let me tell you. So yeah, not a book to read if you're feeling a bit depressed about the world, which is how I feel pretty much day to day. To brighten me up, I read and finished Busy Phillips, which is obviously not Victober, but it was a read that I started in Victober and it really lightened the load. So I was super happy to have it. I loved it. It did go a bit sort of, and then this happened and then that happened, which can sometimes happen in biographies, I think, when you're trying to cover ground. I think especially in celebrity biographies, you're trying to cover ground that people are expecting you to cover. You know, people want to know how it was when she was in Dawson's Creek and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it wasn't, you know, the childhood ones were really good because they were these big blocks of memory and this big event and it affected me like this. And then when she sort of got to her 20s, it did feel a bit like, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and didn't necessarily have an impact upon a larger story. But the writing on a whole was really good. So either Busy Phillips is an awesome writer or her editor is good as well. Could be a bit of both. But to be honest, looking at her Instagram, it felt like a very true voice to her. So I think she deserves most of the credit on this. Yes, and I feel like it's been left where there is a lot more to say. So there'll probably be another one. Definitely thought it was a good feminist read, that one. And then I started a book, Outside Valentine by Liza Ward. So this is quite a bleak one. This is about a real life murder, set of murders that occurred in Nebraska in the 50s. Yeah, late 50s. And this is Liza Ward's reimagining of how those murders took place. Because they were done by very young people, 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they were boyfriend and girlfriend. How it goes into their minds, well, into the mind of Carol Ann, who is the young girl, and then into the lives of some other people. So I'm a little way through. I've read about 50 pages, I think, which is usually just over, usually my kind of aren't I going to carry on with this? And I have been on the fence. It started off really, really good. So the first, I love the first line. In my dream, the snow was falling all across my old Nebraska. Brilliant first line. And it's kind of unexpected. There's loads of little details about the lives of the characters that I can only assume that Liza Ward has made up, because they're sort of little things that happen over the breakfast table type thing, and they're really unique. But in that way, it kind of felt a bit, and I hate saying this, but it felt like I've done a creative writing course and I've learned how to make things unique and how it can affect a reader, because there's almost too many of them to feel real. Some of the language, I felt, one of the characters says to another, "Why do you touch me like a cactus?" Yeah, I'm not sure, especially seeing as he's just traced his finger down her spine. I'm not in the habit of tracing my finger down a cactus, and I didn't feel like it was an accurate analogy for what he did, and it just jarred. I mean, I think it's meant to sound profound or whatever, and it just didn't sit well with me. Also, I'd love to know your thoughts on a book that uses the description ample breasts. I feel like there should be a rule, like it's kind of said through the eyes of one of the characters. That might be forgivable. I just don't think any description should involve the term ample when it's connected to breasts. Like, ample for what? You know? What are we talking about? Yeah, I don't like it. So I'd love to know what you think about that. When I got to that phrase, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I can carry on with this. So I have carried on a little bit past the ample breasts remark, and I kind of feel like if I get any further, I'm just going to have to commit to it. So I don't know, some of it is awesome, like I say, some of it less so. So that's it. I think that's probably the shortest video I've ever done. The next video, there is a giant stack of books which I hope aren't in shot. I've just moved them out of shot if they were. And they are going to be my non-fiction November, which I said I wasn't going to do, but I actually might do. And also a couple of fiction books that I want to read by the end of 2018. So I'm going to go film that now, have a cup of tea, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.